I spent 3 weeks planning my son's 30th birthday party. Every single detail. The catering from that Italian place he loved as a kid. The bourbon his colleagues would drink. White roses because anything else felt too maternal. I maxed out my credit card. $3,000 I don't have. I worked night shifts at the hospital for 27 years so he could have everything. New cleats when his father left us. College tuition. I'm still paying off, except he doesn't know that. He thinks he paid his own loans. I paid them. $73,000. Last payment in March while he was in Austin posting pictures of breakfast tacos. The house was packed. 40 people I didn't know. His girlfriend Simone kept rearranging my flowers, adjusting my lighting, like my taste wasn't good enough for his life. His friends stood in clusters talking about funding rounds and startups, holding expensive glasses of wine in my living room. I moved through my own house like furniture, refilling drinks, clearing plates, smiling, until my face hurt. Then Marcus stood up to make a toast. Everyone went quiet. He thanked his team, thanked his mentor, thanked Simone. Then he looked at me standing there with a trash bag in my hands and said, "And of course my mom, who put this whole thing together. Though I think some people have already passed their expiration date here. Right, Mom?" The entire room exploded with laughter. Real laughter. His boss was grinning. His friends were doubled over. Simone covered her mouth, laughing into her hand. Someone near me whispered, "Oh my God, that's brutal," while giggling. Marcus raised his glass higher, soaking it in. He'd landed the joke perfectly. I was the joke. My age, my presence in his life. I'd become the punchline. I stood there holding garbage in my 54-year-old hands, while 40 people laughed at me being expired, at being past my usefulness, at still existing in my successful son's life when I should have known better. He didn't see my face. He never really sees me anymore. I walked out to my backyard, stood in the October rain, and something inside me just broke. Not loud, just quiet and final, like a bone that's been cracked for years finally snapping clean through. I went upstairs and packed a suitcase, put in clothes, documents, the photo of my grandmother, the rosary I never used but can't throw away. Downstairs, the party kept going. Nobody noticed I was gone. Why would they? I'd already been gone for years. At 3 a.m, after everyone left, after Marcus drove off to continue celebrating without me, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote him a letter. I told him about starving myself for 3 weeks so he could have those cleats. About his college graduation I went to alone because he chose a concert over me. About the breast biopsy I had last year while he was in Barcelona. The lump I found. The 3 days I thought I might be dying. How I sat in that doctor's office completely alone getting results that were benign, thank God. And I realized he didn't even know. Didn't know because I'd trained him so well not to worry about me, not to see me. I told him I forgave him. Because I do. But I also told him I was leaving. That I couldn't keep disappearing. That some part of me needed to exist beyond his convenience. I ended it with, "You made me feel invisible. Now I am." I left the letter on his kitchen counter, loaded my car, drove east toward Asheville, toward my grandmother's empty house, toward whatever comes after you finally stop making yourself small. My phone started ringing at dawn. Marcus calling. Again and again. 23 missed calls. I didn't answer. What could he possibly say? Sorry? Sorry doesn't cover 30 years of casual erasure. Sorry doesn't pay back the $73,000. Sorry doesn't undo standing in my own house being laughed at for still existing. I'm in Asheville now, in my grandmother's brick cottage with the dogwoods out front. The house she left me 5 years ago that I could never sell, because it felt like the last place someone loved me without measuring what I could provide. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if Marcus will come looking for me. I don't know if I'll let him in if he does. I don't know if a mother can just walk away from her child, even when that child is 30 years old. and has spent a decade treating her like an inconvenience. All I know is, I can't go back to being invisible. Can't go back to smiling through my own erasure. Can't keep giving pieces of myself away until there's nothing left. But God, I'm terrified. Because what if leaving means losing him completely? What if this is the thing he can't forgive? What if I've just traded one kind of disappearing for another? My phone is dead now. I forgot the charger. Or maybe I didn't forget. Maybe some part of me needed the silence. Either way, I'm here. In this quiet house. In this small town where nobody knows me as anyone's mother. Just Diana. Just me. And I don't know if that's enough anymore. I woke up at 5:30 on the morning of Marcus's 30th birthday. The way I used to wake when he was small and needed me before the sun came up. Some habits live in your bones. The house was dark and quiet. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator. And for a moment I let myself enjoy it. The stillness before the performance began. I'd planned this party for 3 weeks. Every detail mapped out on the yellow legal pad I kept by the kitchen phone. The same kind of pad I'd used to track his childhood. Vaccination schedules, permission slips, college application deadlines. Now it held different lists. Caterer, confirm by Tuesday. Flowers, white roses, nothing too maternal. Bourbon, the expensive kind his boss drinks. Playlist, ask Marcus for suggestions. Casual, don't seem desperate. That last note stung every time I looked at it. Don't seem desperate. When had I become someone who needed reminding not to embarrass my own son? I made coffee in the French press Marcus had given me last Christmas, still in its Williams-Sonoma box until I'd unwrapped it specifically for today. He'd handed it to me with an apologetic smile. I know you're more of a Mr. Coffee person, Mom, but this is better. Trust me. I'd thanked him, tucked it away, kept using my $30 machine that worked just fine. But this morning, I used his gift, pressing down the plunger slowly, watching the ground swirl and settle. A small offering. Maybe he'd notice. Portland in October meant rain, the soft, persistent kind that blurred the edges of everything. Through my kitchen window, I could see the neighbor's maple losing its leaves, red and gold plastered against the wet sidewalk. I'd lived in this house for 8 years. Bought it after the divorce, with money I'd saved working double shifts at Providence Hospital. Night shifts paid more. I'd learned to sleep in fragments, to exist in the margins of other people's emergencies. The house wasn't much. A 1970s ranch style in the Montevilla neighborhood, the kind of place young couples bought to renovate and flip. I'd done neither. The kitchen cabinets were still that honey oak color everyone hated now. The countertops beige formica with a burn mark near the stove, from the time I'd left a pot holder too close to the burner. Marcus had offered to help me update it once, standing in this very spot with his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the room like a problem to solve. I'd told him I liked it fine the way it was. Truth was, I couldn't afford contractors. The divorce had left me with the house and Marcus's college debt. Debt his father had promised to split, then conveniently forgot about when he remarried that woman from his firm. Karen, 28 years old, blonde, the kind of pretty that made men stupid. She'd sent me a Facebook friend request once, back when Marcus was still in school. I'd stared at her profile picture for 10 minutes. Her and Robert on some beach, her hand on his chest, both of them tan and laughing, before blocking her. Some doors you close and lock and never open again. I'd paid off Marcus's loans last year. $73,000 over 12 years. The final payment made on a Tuesday in March while Marcus was in Austin for South by Southwest, posting photos of breakfast tacos and tech panels. He'd called that night, excited about some pitch meeting. I'd listened, proud and aching, and never mentioned what I'd done. What would be the point? He'd just feel guilty, and guilt was another burden mothers carry so their children don't have to. By 6:15, I'd showered and dressed in the outfit I'd bought specifically for today. Navy slacks from Macy's, a cream silk blouse that felt too delicate for my life, a thin gold necklace my grandmother had given me before she died. I studied myself in the bathroom mirror, this 54-year-old woman trying to look elegant enough for her son's 30th birthday party, trying to look like someone who belonged in the life he'd built. My hair had gone mostly gray, which Marcus's girlfriend, Simone, had commented on last month. "You'd look 10 years younger with some highlights, Diana. I know a great colorist." She'd said it kindly, touching my arm, her voice gentle the way you'd speak to someone who didn't know better. I'd smiled and said maybe, knowing I'd never call, knowing my grocery budget didn't include $200 hair appointments. I'd met Simone 6 months ago, when Marcus brought her to Sunday dinner, a tradition I'd tried to maintain even as his visits became monthly, then every 6 weeks, then whenever he could make it. She was 26, a brand strategist, whatever that meant. Beautiful in that effortless way certain women are. Like they'd never struggled with anything heavier than which yoga class to attend. She'd complimented my pot roast, then spent the rest of the meal talking about a cleanse she was doing. Marcus had watched her like she was something rare and breakable. I'd liked her, in the way you like someone who's polite to you without really seeing you. She called me Diana, not Mrs. Hartwell, which Marcus said was more casual, more genuine. It felt like another small erasure, another way of pretending I wasn't who I was. His mother, the woman who'd given up pieces of herself so he could become the man sitting at my table, nodding along to his girlfriend's stories about influencer marketing. The caterer arrived at 8. Lucia, a tired-looking woman about my age who ran a small Italian place in Southeast. I'd chosen her because her lasagna reminded me of my grandmother's, and because her prices were reasonable. Marcus had suggested something more upscale, but I'd already stretched my budget past breaking. This party was costing me almost $3,000. Money I didn't have, money I'd put on a credit card I'd have to chip away at for months. "You need help setting up?" Lucia asked, hauling aluminum trays into my kitchen. "I've got it," I said, which was mostly true. I'd borrowed folding tables from the church, St. Philip Neri, the parish I'd attended sporadically over the years, more out of habit than faith. Father Tom had helped me load them into my car, asking about Marcus, telling me how proud I must be. I'd nodded, smiled, felt that familiar tightness in my chest that came from pretending everything was fine. By 10, I had the tables set up in the living room and back patio, covered with white tablecloths I'd ironed the night before. The flowers arrived next, white roses like I'd ordered, arranged in simple glass vases. Nothing too fussy. Nothing that would make Marcus's friends whisper about his mom trying too hard. I'd invited 40 people. Marcus had sent me the list 2 weeks ago via email, a spreadsheet with names I didn't recognize and dietary restrictions I had to Google. "Keep it casual, Mom. Just appetizers and drinks, nothing formal." So I'd ordered casual, fancy casual, the kind of casual that costs $50 a person. My kitchen became a staging area. Prosciutto-wrapped figs, caprese skewers, arancini, bruschetta. I'd made the bruschetta myself last night, chopping tomatoes and basil at midnight because Lucia's version wasn't quite right, and I couldn't serve something I didn't believe in. The tomatoes had come from the farmer's market on Division, still warm from the late-season sun. I'd saved them for this, for him. Marcus arrived at 11 to check on things. He came through the front door without knocking. It was still technically his house, too, or had been. In that nebulous way, childhood homes remain yours even after you've built a life elsewhere. He lived in the Pearl District now, in a glass-walled condo overlooking the river, the kind of place featured in those Portland Living magazines at the dentist's office. "Hey, Mom." He kissed my cheek, smelling like expensive cologne and rain. He wore dark jeans and a fitted button-down, his hair styled in that deliberately casual way that took effort to achieve. My son was handsome. Objectively, heartbreakingly handsome, with his father's strong jaw and my father's dark eyes. Strangers had always stopped to comment on him. Such a beautiful baby, such a striking young man. He'd learned early that his appearance opened doors. "Everything looks great," he said, scanning the room the way he'd done that day he offered to renovate. Assessing, cataloging. "Simone's running late, but she'll be here by 1. Oh, and I forgot to mention, my boss is coming. Daniel Chen. Big deal, so just, you know." I didn't know, actually, but I nodded. "Of course. Should I?" "You don't need to do anything different. Just be yourself." He said it kindly, but I heard the subtext. Be yourself, but the understated version. The version that doesn't embarrass me. "I made bruschetta," I offered. "Your favorite." "Mom, I haven't eaten bread in like 2 years." He laughed, patting his flat stomach. "But I'm sure people will love it." Something small died in my chest. I'd made bruschetta at midnight, standing in my kitchen with aching feet, because I remembered him at 14 asking for it every Sunday. I remembered him saying it was his favorite, the way his face lit up when I brought it to the table. But that was 10 years ago, and apparently people changed and mothers didn't get the memo. "Right," I said. "Of course." Marcus moved through the house, adjusting things. He shifted a vase 2 inches to the left, turned down the music I'd queued up, his own playlist, the one he'd finally sent me after I'd asked 3 times. He opened the back door to get some airflow, even though it was 50 degrees and drizzling. I trailed behind him, a ghost in my own home, watching him remake the space into something more suitable. "You invited the Kowalskis?" He'd found my own small list. The neighbors, Father Tom, Linda from the hospital, who'd been kind to me during the divorce. Just a few people I thought might. "Mom, this is my birthday party, not a church social." He softened it with a smile, but the words landed like stones. "I mean, it's fine. Whatever. But maybe keep them. I don't know. Separate from my friends? Keep them separate. Keep me separate." I was already learning the geography of the evening, the invisible boundaries I wasn't supposed to cross. By noon, the house was ready. I'd changed into my outfit, touched up my makeup, stared at my gray hair and decided Simone was probably right. But it was too late now. I'd put out the food, set up the bar, made sure every surface was clean and every detail perfect. My feet hurt. My back hurt. But none of that mattered because today was about Marcus, about celebrating this milestone, about being the mother he needed me to be, which is to say, present but not prominent, helpful but not hovering, visible enough to have done the work, invisible enough not to intrude on his narrative. The guests started arriving at 1:30. They came in clusters, these beautiful young people in clothes that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. The women wore things I didn't have words for, jumpsuits and asymmetrical tops and boots that looked delicate but somehow weren't. The men had beards and tattoos and watches that caught the light. They moved through my house like they owned it, comfortable and confident, pulling Marcus into hugs and inside jokes I wasn't part of. Simone arrived in a rush of apologies and air kisses, wearing a rust-colored dress that made her look like autumn personified. She found me in the kitchen, touched my arm again, that gentle, pitying touch, and told me everything looked absolutely perfect, Diana. Like Pinterest-level perfect. I didn't know what Pinterest-level meant, but I smiled and thanked her. "Marcus is so lucky to have you," she added, and somehow that felt worse than saying nothing at all. I became a satellite orbiting my own party. I refreshed platters. I opened wine. I collected empty glasses and wiped down surfaces and smiled at people who looked through me. A few of Marcus's friends made polite conversation, asked what I did, seemed surprised when I said I was a nurse, acted like that was quaint somehow. One woman, drunk already at 3 p.m., told me I looked amazing for my age, and I didn't know if I should thank her or cry. Linda came, bless her. Linda with her sensible shoes, and her questions about my garden, and her complete lack of pretension. We stood in the corner of my kitchen, 2 women in our 50s, watching these younger people live their beautiful lives. She didn't say anything, but I saw her take it all in. Saw her clock, the way Marcus barely acknowledged me, the way Simone rearranged the flowers I'd spent 20 minutes positioning, the way I kept moving, kept working, kept making myself useful because utility was the only value I had left. Father Tom stopped by for 20 minutes, drank 1 beer, told Marcus he remembered when he was this high, and made the mistake of asking if he'd been to Mass lately. Marcus laughed it off with a non-answer about being spiritually aligned but not religiously practicing, which was a fancy way of saying no. Father Tom caught my eye across the room, and in that look I saw understanding. He'd buried my grandmother. He'd counseled me through the divorce. He knew about disappeared faith, about children who grew past the rituals that sustained their mothers. By 4 o'clock, the party had hit its peak. My house, my modest little ranch house in Montavilla, was packed with 40 people I mostly didn't know, celebrating a son who mostly didn't see me. The noise was tremendous. Music and laughter and the clink of glasses, everyone talking over each other. That peculiar roar of collective joy. I stood near the kitchen doorway, watching Marcus hold court in my living room. He was in his element, telling stories, making people laugh, 1 arm around Simone, while the other gestured wildly. He glowed. That's the only word for it. He was incandescent with success and youth, and the particular confidence of someone who'd never had to sacrifice anything that mattered. And I was proud. God, I was so proud it hurt. This brilliant, beautiful man. I'd made him. I'd carried him. I'd raised him alone after Robert left. I'd worked night shifts and skipped meals and worn the same 3 pairs of scrubs for years so he could have new clothes, could play sports, could go on school trips. I'd edited his college essays at 2 a.m. between shifts. I'd co-signed his apartment lease. I'd sent him money when he couldn't make rent. Told him not to worry about paying me back even though I worried about paying my own bills. I'd poured myself into him like water into earth, and he'd grown tall and strong and beautiful. And somewhere along the way, I'd disappeared. Mrs. Hartwell? A young man stood beside me, holding an empty glass. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. This is an amazing party. Marcus is really lucky. Thank you, I managed. Can I get you anything? Oh, no, I'm good. I just wanted to say, I went to school with Marcus, at Reed, and he talked about you sometimes, about how hard you worked to send him there. Something cracked in my chest. This stranger, this boy I'd never met, knew more about my sacrifices than my son seemed to remember. That's kind of you to say. He doesn't talk about it much anymore, the young man continued, and I could see he was slightly drunk, his filter failing. But back then, man, he was so grateful. Used to say his mom was his hero. Used to say, past tense. I excused myself before I could cry in front of him, slipping into the hallway bathroom and locking the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid and pressed my palms against my eyes, breathing slowly, counting to 10 like I'd learned to do during panic attacks after the divorce. The bathroom still had the wallpaper from when Marcus was little, tiny sailboats on a cream background. I'd meant to change it for years. Through the door I could hear the party continuing, oblivious. Someone had turned up the music. Someone else shrieked with laughter. My absence didn't register. I could stay here for an hour and no one would notice, but I didn't have an hour. I had a party to host, a role to play. I fixed my makeup, straightened my blouse, unlocked the door. Marcus was in the kitchen when I emerged, pulling a bottle of bourbon from the cabinet, the expensive stuff I'd bought specifically for tonight. Hey, Mom, we're running low on the good stuff. You don't mind if we break into this, right? He didn't wait for an answer, just cracked it open, poured generous glasses for the cluster of men who'd gathered around him. Daniel Chen, his boss, a couple of other tech guys with startup names I couldn't follow. They were talking about funding rounds and market disruption, and the particular language of people who believed they were changing the world. I stayed quiet, started gathering empty plates from the counter. Marcus glanced at me once, a flicker of awareness, then turned back to his conversation. I was furniture, part of the backdrop. "Your mum's great," Daniel said, and it felt like being patted on the head. "My mum's nothing like this. She'd have a meltdown trying to host 40 people. Yeah, she's pretty chill," Marcus agreed, and I understood that this was my role now. The chill mom, the cool mom, the mom who didn't demand too much or feel too much or exist too loudly in her own home. 5 o'clock came, then 6. The caterer packed up and left. Linda hugged me goodbye, whispered, "Call me tomorrow," in a way that suggested she saw what I couldn't admit. Father Tom had long since gone. The neighbors I'd invited had stayed exactly 1 hour, fulfilling their obligation before retreating to their own lives. What remained was Marcus's party, his friends, his world, his life that had nothing to do with me, except as the woman who'd provided the venue. I kept moving, kept cleaning, kept playing my part. Around 6:30, Marcus called for attention. Someone handed him a fresh glass of champagne. The room quieted, 40 faces turning toward my son, everyone smiling in anticipation. Okay, he said, laughing at the sudden spotlight. Simone stood beside him, her hand on his back, looking at him the way I used to look at Robert before everything fell apart. "I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming out tonight. 30 feels significant, you know? Like I'm officially an adult now." Laughter rippled through the room, and I'm grateful to be surrounded by such incredible people. My team, my friends, my beautiful girlfriend. He pulled Simone close, kissed her temple. More laughter, a few whistles. And of course, my mom, who put this whole thing together. He gestured toward me with his glass, and suddenly, 40 pairs of eyes found me where I stood near the kitchen doorway, plastic bag of trash in hand. I forced a smile. "Seriously, Mom, this is amazing. You went all out." Polite applause. Simone blew me a kiss. I nodded, acknowledging the recognition, waiting for him to move on. But he didn't move on. "Although," Marcus continued, his smile widening, that comedic timing kicking in, "I think some people have already passed their expiration date here, right, Mom?" He said it playfully, affectionately even. He winked at me across the room, and the house exploded with laughter. Real laughter. Genuine, uncontrolled, shoulders-shaking laughter. People doubled over. Someone near me muttered, "Oh my God, that's brutal," while still giggling. Simone covered her mouth, her eyes wide, laughing into her hand. Even Daniel Chen, Marcus's boss, was grinning, shaking his head in that way men do when they're impressed by someone's audacity. I felt my smile freeze on my face. My hands went numb. The plastic bag slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud that no one heard beneath the waves of laughter. Marcus raised his glass higher, basking in the reaction, clearly delighted he'd landed the joke so perfectly. And I understood, with perfect clarity, that I was the joke, not the party, not the situation. Me, my age, my presence, my relevance in his life. It had all become comedic material. I was the punchline he delivered to bond with his friends, to show how clever he was, how modern and irreverent and unencumbered by maternal sentimentality. I was the thing that had passed its expiration date. The room kept laughing. Marcus kept smiling. No one looked at me anymore. The moment had moved on, the joke delivered and received. Someone started talking about where they should all go for drinks later. Marcus was nodding, planning the next phase of his birthday celebration, the phase that clearly didn't include his mother. I picked up the trash bag with hands I couldn't feel. My vision had gone strange, everything too bright and too distant at once. I walked through the party like a ghost, like someone who'd already left, making my way toward the back door that opened onto my small patio. The October air hit my face, cold and wet. The neighbor's maple was almost bare now, its leaves a soggy carpet on the ground. I could still hear the party inside, music and voices, and the particular sound of people enjoying themselves without you. I stood in my backyard, in the rain, holding a bag of trash, and something fundamental inside me broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet fracture. The kind of break you don't notice until you try to put weight on it and realize it won't hold anymore. I'd spent 30 years building this person. I'd given him everything I had. My youth, my ambitions, my money, my body, my time. I'd worked myself to exhaustion. I'd gone without. I'd swallowed disappointments and pretended everything was fine, and told myself that sacrifice was love, that erasure was grace. And he'd turned me into a joke, not because he was cruel, that would almost be easier, but because he genuinely didn't see me anymore. I'd made myself so small, so accommodating, so determinedly uncomplicated that I'd become invisible, a convenience, a service. The woman who threw parties and didn't expect gratitude, who paid off loans and didn't expect acknowledgement, who loved without limit and didn't expect to be loved back with the same intensity. I'd taught him to take me for granted, and he'd learned the lesson perfectly. Inside, someone cranked up the music. The bass thrummed through the walls of my house, where I suddenly didn't belong. I went back inside through the rear door, moving through my own home like a trespasser. No one noticed me. Marcus was taking selfies with his friends. Simone was showing someone something on her phone. The party had reached that tipping point where people forget where they are, forget whose space they're occupying. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed I'd bought at a clearance sale 3 years ago, the same bed I'd cried myself to sleep in after the divorce, after lonely holidays, after every small evidence of my increasing irrelevance. And I made a decision, not rashly, not emotionally, though God knows I had every right, but with the kind of clarity that comes from finally admitting something you've known for a long time. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep making myself small. Couldn't keep pretending that this reduction of my entire existence to a supporting role in someone else's story was enough. It wasn't enough. I wasn't sure what I deserved, but I knew it was more than this. I pulled my suitcase from the closet, the same one I'd used when Robert left, and I'd briefly considered running away before realizing I had nowhere to run. But I had somewhere now. Asheville, my grandmother's house, the one I'd inherited 5 years ago, and kept meaning to sell but never could. A small brick cottage on a quiet street, sitting empty except for the times I went back to check on it. I started packing. Not frantically, methodically, the way I'd learned to handle unbearable things, one item at a time, breathing through it, moving forward because stillness meant drowning. Clothes, toiletries, the photograph of my grandmother I kept on my nightstand, the rosary I didn't use but couldn't throw away, my nursing license and passport and the documents you need when you're building a life. Downstairs, the party raged on. No one came looking for me. Why would they? I was already gone. Had been for years. Tonight had just made it official. I packed until the suitcase was full, until my closet looked like someone was leaving. Then I sat on the bed and stared at the wallpaper, cream with tiny roses, chosen when I'd first bought this house and thought it might become something more than just a place to sleep between shifts. The party noise changed around 9. Voices grew louder, sloppier. Someone broke a glass. Someone else suggested moving the celebration to a bar downtown. I heard Marcus agreeing, heard him organizing rides, heard the exodus begin. I stayed in my room, listening to my house empty out, listening to car doors slam, engines start, voices fade into the rainy Portland night. Finally, silence. I waited 20 minutes to be sure, then crept downstairs. The house looked like a disaster area. Empty glasses everywhere, plates on every surface, food ground into the carpet, wine spilled on my beige couch, a dark stain spreading like a bruise. Marcus was gone. Of course he was gone. Off to continue his birthday celebration without the woman who'd made it possible. I found him a note card in the drawer by the phone, the kind I kept for thank you notes I never wrote, and I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd eaten dinner alone for 8 years, where I'd signed the divorce papers and the loan documents and all the other contracts of my diminishing life. And I wrote. Not everything. There wasn't enough space for everything, but enough. I told him about the cleats I'd bought instead of eating dinner, about the degree I'd abandoned because daycare costs more than tuition, about working Christmas Eves so he could have the bike he wanted and forgot to thank me for. I told him about the lump I'd found last year, the biopsy I went to alone, the results I received while he was in Barcelona posting photos of Gothic architecture. I told him about sitting in that doctor's office, benign thank God, and realizing I'd become so small in his life that even my body's potential rebellion didn't warrant mentioning, because I'd trained him so thoroughly not to worry about me. I told him I forgave him, because I did, terribly, hopelessly, against every instinct that said I shouldn't. But I also told him I couldn't do this anymore, couldn't be invisible, couldn't watch him turn me into a punchline while I stood there smiling, pretending it didn't break something essential inside me. The letter ended, "You made me feel invisible. Now I am." I sealed it in an envelope, wrote his name on the front, left it on the kitchen counter where he'd find it when he came back for his car. Then I loaded my suitcase into my 10-year-old Honda, backed out of the driveway at 3 a.m. and drove east, away from the rain, away from Portland, away from the sun who'd forgotten how to see me, toward Asheville, toward the small brick cottage with the dogwoods out front, toward whatever came next for a 54-year-old woman who'd spent 3 decades building someone else's life and had nothing left of her own. The highway stretched out before me, empty and dark. I drove through the night with the radio off, listening to nothing but the sound of my tires on wet pavement, the rhythm of escape. And for the first time in 30 years, I didn't cry. I just drove. I crossed into Idaho as the sun came up, the sky turning that particular shade of pink that makes you believe in second chances. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. My eyes burned. But I kept driving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant questioning. And I couldn't afford to question this decision. Not yet. I stopped for gas in Boise, a nothing town that felt like everywhere and nowhere. The station was nearly empty. Just me and a trucker filling up his rig, and a teenage clerk behind bulletproof glass who barely looked up when I paid for my coffee. I stood outside in the cold morning air, holding a styrofoam cup that burned my palms, watching traffic move along the interstate like blood through veins. Everyone going somewhere. Everyone running towards something or away from something else. My phone had been buzzing since dawn. I'd turned off the ringer somewhere around Baker City, but the screen kept lighting up with Marcus's name. 23 missed calls, 14 text messages. I didn't read them, didn't listen to the voicemails. I just watched his name appear and disappear, like a ghost knocking on a door I'd already locked. What could he possibly say that would matter now? I got back in my car and kept driving, through Idaho's empty stretches, through Wyoming's wind-scraped plains. I stopped when I had to, for gas, for bathrooms, for truck stop coffee that tasted like despair. But mostly I drove, putting miles between me and the woman I'd been for 30 years. The woman who said yes when she meant no, who smiled through pain, who made herself convenient and called it love. Somewhere in Nebraska, around midnight on the second day, exhaustion finally won. I pulled into a Super 8 off the highway, paid cash for a room, and collapsed onto a bed that smelled like industrial detergent and other people's sleep. I didn't dream. I just fell into blackness and stayed there until afternoon light crept through the polyester curtains. When I woke, my phone was dead. I'd forgotten to bring a charger. Or maybe I hadn't forgotten. Maybe some part of me wanted this disconnection, this clean break from everything I'd left behind. I showered in the motel's narrow bathroom, using the tiny soap bar and the shampoo that barely lathered, stared at myself in the mirror, my gray hair, my face without makeup, my eyes that looked older than 54. This is who I was without Marcus, without motherhood. Just Diana, just me. I didn't know her very well anymore. Marcus found the letter around 2 p.m. on Sunday, hungover and irritable, letting himself back into my house to collect his car. He'd spent the night at Simone's downtown apartment, waking up to texts from friends thanking him for an epic party. He felt good. 30 looked good on him. Life was working out exactly as he'd planned. I know this because he told me later, during one of our careful, painful conversations. He told me everything about that day, about the moment his world tilted sideways. I think he needed me to know, needed me to understand that he hadn't meant it, hadn't seen it coming, hadn't realized what he'd done. But intentions don't erase wounds. I'd learned that the hard way. He walked into my kitchen, his kitchen, the kitchen of his childhood, and saw the envelope on the counter, his name in my handwriting. He almost didn't open it, thought maybe it was a birthday card, something sentimental he could read later. But something about the placement felt deliberate, intentional. He tore it open standing there, his keys still in his hand, and his life broke apart. Dear Marcus, I'm writing this at 3 a.m. in the house I bought so you'd have a place to come home to, even though you haven't lived here in 8 years. The party is over. You're gone, out celebrating with people who know the man you've become, while I'm here cleaning up and trying to remember when I became someone you could joke about to a room full of strangers. Some people have passed their expiration date. You said it so easily. Everyone laughed so naturally. And I understood in that moment that this is how you see me now. Not as your mother, not as the person who shaped your entire existence, but as an inconvenience, a relic, something that's overstayed its welcome in your new, polished life. I want you to know something, Marcus. I need you to know what that joke cost. Do you remember the cleats? You were 12, playing for that travel soccer team, the good team, the one that required dues and equipment we couldn't afford. Your father had been gone for 2 years. I was working nights at Providence, coming home at 7 a.m. to get you to school, sleeping 3 hours, then getting up to take you to practice. You needed new cleats. The coach said the ones you had weren't regulation. They cost $140, more than I spent on groceries that month. I bought them. I didn't eat dinner for 3 weeks, just coffee and whatever was left over from your lunch. I told you I was doing a cleanse, that it was healthy. You believed me because you were 12, and it never occurred to you to question it. You wore those cleats for 6 months, outgrew them, never mentioned them again. That's the first thing I want you to know. There were 1,000 moments like that, 1,000 quiet sacrifices I never mentioned, because what was the point? You were a child. You shouldn't have had to carry the weight of what it took to raise you alone. But you're not a child anymore. Do you remember my graduation? Not yours, mine. I was finally going to finish my nursing degree, the one I'd started before you were born, and had to abandon when your father left. I was 37 years old, sitting in a stadium full of 22-year-olds, about to walk across a stage and receive something I'd worked for across 14 years of night classes and online courses and studying after you went to bed. I invited you. You said you'd come. You were 19, home from college for the summer. But the night before, your friends invited you to a concert in Seattle, some band I'd never heard of. You asked if I'd mind if you skipped it. I said I understood. I smiled. I told you to have fun. I walked across that stage with 200 other graduates, and I searched the crowd for your face anyway, knowing you weren't there, hoping maybe you'd surprised me. You hadn't. You called the next day, said the concert was amazing, asked if graduation had been nice. Nice. That's the second thing I want you to know. I never told you it mattered. Never told you I'd spent 14 years working toward that moment. Never told you I cried in the parking lot afterward, sitting in my car, wearing a rental cap and gown, completely alone. I taught you that my feelings didn't matter, that my accomplishments were secondary, that I was fine, always fine, no matter what you needed or didn't need from me. Last year, I found a lump in my breast, a hard mass that appeared seemingly overnight, that made my stomach drop every time I touched it. I scheduled a biopsy, went alone to the imaging center, sat in a paper gown in a freezing room while a radiologist I'd never met extracted tissue from my body with a needle that felt like violence. You were in Barcelona. You'd posted about it on Instagram. Some tech conference, rooftop drinks, Gaudi architecture. You looked so happy, so free. I got the results while you were gone. Benign. Thank God, benign. But for 3 days I lived with the possibility that it wasn't. For 3 days I walked around carrying the weight of potential death. And I didn't tell you because why would I? You had your life, your conferences, your beautiful girlfriend, and your rising career. Why burden you with your mother's mortal body? When you got back, you called. You told me about the paella you'd eaten, the people you'd met. You asked how I was doing. I said fine, fine, always fine. That's the third thing I want you to know. I have trained you carefully and completely to stop seeing me, to stop considering me as someone with needs, fears, a body that ages, a heart that breaks. I did this because I thought that's what good mothers do. We absorb the pain. We make it easy. We disappear so our children can shine. But tonight, Marcus, when you made that joke, when you looked at me across my own living room in the house I bought with money, I earned working shifts you never asked about. During a party, I spent $3,000 I don't have to throw for you. I realized I can't do this anymore. I can't keep erasing myself. I can't keep pretending that your success fills the void where my own life used to be. I can't keep smiling through jokes about my irrelevance. The college loans you think you paid off yourself? I paid them. $73,000 over 12 years. I made the final payment in March while you were in Austin posting about breakfast tacos. I never told you because I knew you'd feel guilty. And I didn't want guilt. I don't even know what I wanted. Acknowledgement, maybe. To be seen. But I wasn't seen. I'm not seen. I've become wallpaper in your life. Convenient background. Something to thank generically in a toast before moving on to the people who actually matter. So, I'm leaving. Not to punish you. Not to make a point. But because staying means continuing to disappear, and I don't have enough of myself left to keep giving away. I'm going to Asheville, to Grandma Rose's house, the one I inherited and couldn't sell because it felt like selling, the last place, where someone loved me without measuring my usefulness. I'm going to figure out who I am when I'm not your mother, when I'm not anyone's anything. Just Diana. I forgive you, Marcus. I need you to know that. I forgive you for the joke, for the graduation you missed, for the phone calls you didn't make, for learning the lessons I taught you too well. But I also need you to know that forgiveness doesn't mean staying. It doesn't mean continuing to make myself small so you can feel big. It doesn't mean pretending I didn't hear what you said, didn't feel what I felt, didn't finally understand that I've spent 30 years building a person who doesn't actually need me anymore, and maybe never really did. Not in the way I needed to be needed. You made me feel invisible. Now I am. Take care of yourself. You're very good at it. Mama Marcus read it once, then again. Then a third time, each word sinking deeper, each sentence restructuring his understanding of everything. His legs went weak. He grabbed the counter for support, but it wasn't enough. He slid down, his back against my kitchen cabinets, the letter trembling in his hands. He tried to breathe but couldn't, tried to think, but his thoughts were white noise. The kitchen blurred. His chest felt like something was crushing it from the inside. The cleats. He remembered them now. Blue and white. Adidas. Exactly what everyone else on the team had. He remembered being relieved. Remembered not being the poor kid anymore. Remembered his mom saying she was on some health kick, drinking Slim Fast for dinner, looking tired but smiling anyway. She'd starved herself so he could have cleats he'd forgotten about. The graduation. God, the graduation. That concert had been nothing. Some forgettable band in a forgettable venue. He'd thought about skipping it, almost canceled. His mom had seemed fine about it, totally understanding. Had he ever asked about the ceremony afterward? Had he ever considered that maybe she'd needed him there? The lump. She'd had a cancer scare and never told him. While he was posting photos of tapas and Gothic towers, she was alone in a doctor's office waiting to find out if she was dying. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. 23 missed calls. He'd been annoyed by them this morning, irritated that she was being clingy, overdramatic about what was obviously just a joke. A joke. He'd called her expired, made a room full of people laugh at her age, her presence, her existence in his life. And she'd stood there with a bag of trash, smiling through it because that's what she always did. She smiled through everything, made everything easy, disappeared so he could shine. He called her. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Her voice careful and polite. "You've reached Diana. Please leave a message. Mom." His voice cracked. "Mom, please call me back. What could he say? Sorry wasn't big enough. Sorry didn't cover 30 years of casual erasure. Please call me." He tried again. And again. 12 more calls, each one going to voicemail, each one making him more desperate. He called Simone. "Hey, babe. How's the hangover?" She sounded cheerful, completely unaware that the universe had just collapsed. "My mom's gone." "What do you mean gone? Like she went out?" "She left. She's not here. She left me a letter." His throat closed up. He couldn't say more. "Marcus, what's wrong? You're scaring me." "She left because of me. Because of what I said last night. He couldn't finish. The sobs came from somewhere deep, somewhere he'd locked away when his father left, and he'd decided that showing pain meant being weak. Simone went quiet, then carefully. "The expiration date thing. I called her expired, Simone. In front of 40 people. In her own house. At a party she spent thousands of dollars she doesn't have to throw for me. And everyone laughed. Marcus, it was just a joke. She knows that. Does she?" He was standing now, pacing my kitchen, the letter still in his hand. "Did you read her face? Did anyone actually look at her when I said it?" Simone didn't answer. "She paid off my college loans. All of them. I thought I'd done it myself, but she paid them. $73,000. She had a cancer scare last year and never told me. She missed meals so I could have soccer cleats. She went to her college graduation alone because I chose a concert over her. And I never knew. I never asked. I never even noticed because she spent my entire life making sure I wouldn't have to notice. Oh my God." Simone's voice had changed. "Marcus, I have to find her. I have to fix this." Where would she go? "Asheville." She said, "Asheville." Her grandmother's house. He was already moving toward the door, grabbing his keys. "I have to go. I have to." "Marcus, wait. Maybe give her some space. Maybe she needed me to see her." He was shouting now, something breaking loose inside him. She needed me to notice she was disappearing, and I didn't. I made her invisible. That's what she said. I made her feel invisible. He hung up, grabbed his wallet, his jacket, ran to his car and pulled up maps on his phone. Asheville, North Carolina. 28 hours of driving. He could do it in 2 days if he drove straight through. He started the engine, then stopped. I sat there in my driveway, his childhood driveway, and looked at my house. Really looked at it. The paint was fading. The gutters needed cleaning. The front steps had a crack he'd never noticed. This house that he'd taken for granted, that he'd made jokes about being dated to Simone, that he'd offered to update, as if his mother's taste was something that needed fixing. This house she'd bought with money she'd earned on night shifts. This house she'd maintained alone. This house she'd opened to him again and again, no matter how rarely he came, no matter how little he acknowledged it. And he'd never once asked if she needed help with the mortgage, with repairs, with anything. He'd assumed she was fine because she always said she was fine. He'd built his entire adult life on the foundation of her uncomplaining sacrifice, then forgot the foundation existed. The letter sat on his passenger seat. He picked it up again, read the last lines. "You made me feel invisible. Now I am." His mother, the woman who'd given up everything for him, who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd loved him with a ferocity he'd never questioned because it was simply the air he breathed, had finally stopped disappearing. She'd made it literal, and he had no one to blame but himself. Marcus sat in that driveway for 20 minutes, crying the way he hadn't cried since he was 8 years old, and came home to find his father's closet empty. Except this time there was no mother to hold him, no one to say it would be okay, no one to absorb his pain and make it manageable. He was alone with what he'd done. Finally, he wiped his face and pulled out of the driveway, pointed his car east, started driving toward Asheville, toward his mother, toward some impossible version of fixing this. But with every mile he drove, the same thought circled his mind. What if forgiveness didn't mean coming back? What if she'd meant what she said? What if he'd finally pushed too far, taken too much, and there was no gesture big enough to undo 30 years of casual cruelty? I reached Asheville on the 3rd day, exhausted and hollow. The town looked different than I remembered. More tourists, more breweries, more of that carefully curated quaintness that made everywhere feel like a postcard. But my grandmother's street hadn't changed. Elm Avenue, lined with dogwoods and modest brick cottages, the kind of neighborhood where people still swept their porches and knew their neighbors' names. The house sat back from the road, small and square, with a front porch just wide enough for 2 chairs. The dogwoods were past their bloom, but the hydrangeas my grandmother had planted decades ago still crowded the foundation, blue and purple and defiant. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at this place that had belonged to the last person who'd loved me without conditions. My grandmother had died 5 years ago, leaving me this house and the small savings account she'd accumulated working as a secretary at the courthouse. Not much, just enough to cover property taxes and utilities while I figured out what to do with it. I'd visited twice a year, checking on things, paying bills, meaning to sell but never actually listing it. Now I understood why. Some part of me had known I'd need it. Need a place to run to when the carefully constructed life I'd built in Portland finally collapsed. The key was where she'd always hidden it, under the 3rd stone in the rock border, around the flower bed. I let myself in, and the smell hit me immediately. Old wood and lemon polish and something indefinably hers. The furniture was draped in white sheets. Dust covered every surface. But underneath all that was home. Not my home, hers. But maybe that was enough for now. I pulled the sheets off slowly, revealing the floral couch she'd reupholstered herself, the oak coffee table with burn marks from her husband's pipe, the bookshelf full of paperback mysteries and devotional readers. On the mantel sat the crucifix she'd brought from Italy. As a young bride, simple wood worn, smooth by decades of her fingers tracing it during prayers I'd watched but never quite understood. I'd been raised Catholic, more or less. Sunday Mass, Easter and Christmas services, enough catechism to receive First Communion. But faith had never taken root in me the way it had in her. I'd gone through the motions, because that's what you did. But I'd stopped attending regularly after Marcus was born. Too tired, too busy, too angry at a God who'd let Robert leave, who'd let me struggle, who'd seemed fundamentally absent from my life. But standing in my grandmother's living room, looking at that crucifix, I felt something shift. Not faith exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding why she'd held on to it, why she'd knelt every night, rosary in hand, whispering prayers to a God who maybe listened, maybe didn't, but provided a structure for her pain, a way to hold on when everything else fell apart. I spent the rest of that day cleaning, sweeping floors, washing windows, making the house breathable again. Physical work that kept my mind quiet, that let me exist in my body without thinking about what I'd left behind or what came next. As evening fell, I walked downtown. Asheville had grown since my last visit. More restaurants, more shops, more young people with asymmetrical haircuts and expensive outdoor gear. But the basilica was still there, massive and unchanged, its dome visible from blocks away. I went inside without planning to. Just needed somewhere quiet, somewhere apart. The church was nearly empty. Just an old man in the back pew, and a woman lighting candles near the altar. I slid into a pew in the middle, far enough from both of them to feel alone. I hadn't prayed in years, didn't really know how anymore. But I sat there in the silence, in the smell of incense and candle wax, and let myself finally feel everything I'd been running from. The grief, the anger, the terrible relief of having left, the guilt too. Because despite everything, despite the joke and the erasure and the 30 years of slow disappearance, I still loved him, still wanted him to be okay, still carried him in my chest like a second heartbeat that couldn't be silenced. Motherhood didn't turn off just because you walked away. I sat in that church until the light through the stained glass windows faded to nothing, until the old man left and the woman finished her candles, and I was completely alone. Then I whispered into the darkness, "I don't know what I'm doing." No one answered, but somehow that felt like enough. Marcus made it to Asheville 47 hours after leaving Portland. He'd stopped only for gas and bathrooms, living on truck stop coffee, and the kind of desperation that makes sleep impossible. He looked terrible. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, still wearing the clothes from the party. He found my grandmother's address in his phone. He'd been here once, years ago, for the funeral. He remembered almost nothing about it except his mother, crying silently in the front pew, her hand clutching a rosary she didn't quite know how to use. He parked across the street and sat there, staring at the little brick cottage. My car was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. She was there, right there. And he had no idea what to say. Sorry seemed insultingly small. I didn't mean it was both true and irrelevant. Please come home ignored everything she'd written about why she'd left. He sat in his car until dark, watching her shadow move past the windows. Making dinner, probably. Living her life. Existing without him. Finally, he got out. Walked up the porch steps, raised his hand to knock, and hesitated. What if she didn't want to see him? What if she opened the door and told him to leave? What if forgiveness really didn't mean coming back? Behind the door, I heard footsteps on the porch, heard someone breathing, hesitating, heard everything they weren't saying. I knew it was him. Of course it was him. I stood on the other side of that door, my hand on the knob, making a choice. Stay invisible, stay gone, protect what little of myself I'd reclaimed, or open the door and risk everything again. The knock came finally. 3 soft taps. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and made my choice. I opened the door. Marcus stood on my grandmother's porch, backlit by the street lamp, looking like he'd driven through hell to get here. Which, I suppose, he had. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face unshaven, his shirt wrinkled beyond recognition. He looked young suddenly. Not 30, but some age between child and man. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Mom." His voice cracked on the word. We stood there, separated by the threshold, neither of us moving. Behind me, the house was warm with lamplight. Behind him, the October night was cold and dark. 2 worlds, 2 possibilities. "Can I come in?" he asked. I wanted to say no, wanted to close the door and protect this small space I'd claimed for myself. But I couldn't, because despite everything, despite the joke, despite 30 years of erasure, despite my desperate flight across the country, I was still his mother. And mothers open doors even when it costs them. I stepped aside. He came in slowly, like he was entering a church. His eyes moved over the room, my grandmother's furniture, her crucifix on the mantel, the home I'd fled to, looking for clues to this version of me he'd never met. Diana without Marcus. Diana alone. "I read your letter," he said, and then stopped because what else was there to say? The letter had said everything. "I know. Mom, His voice broke again. He pressed his palms against his eyes, shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry." I'd imagined this moment during the drive. Imagined him apologizing. Imagined myself accepting it. Imagined us hugging and everything being fixed. But now that it was happening, I felt nothing. Not anger, not relief. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where my feelings used to be. "Sit down," I said quietly. He sat on my grandmother's floral couch, and I took the chair across from him. Not next to him. The distance felt important. "I drove straight through," he said, wiping his face. "Didn't stop except for gas. I kept calling, but you weren't answering." "My phone's dead. I forgot the charger." "Right, of course." He looked down at his hands. These hands I used to hold when he crossed the street, when he was scared of the dark, when he needed me to make the world safe. "Mom, I don't even know where to start." "Then don't." I was surprised by the firmness in my voice. "Don't start with apologies or explanations. Don't tell me you didn't mean it. Don't tell me it was just a joke." "But I didn't. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Marcus. That's what makes it worse." I leaned forward, needing him to understand this. "If you'd meant it, if you'd been deliberately cruel, I could hate you. I could walk away clean. But you weren't cruel. You were thoughtless. You've been thoughtless for years, and I let you be. And we both built a relationship on the foundation of my silence." He flinched. "I read what you wrote about the cleats, and graduation, and He couldn't say the word. Cancer. The scare I'd had alone. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never asked." The truth was that simple and that devastating. You never asked if I was okay. You never asked if I needed anything. You never asked about my life except as a preamble to telling me about yours. "That's not true. I called you every 2 weeks, I finished for him, for about 15 minutes. And you'd ask how I was, and I'd say fine. And then you'd tell me about work or Simone or whatever conference you were going to. And I'd listen, because that's what I do, what I've always done. Marcus was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. I didn't know. I swear to God, Mom, I didn't know any of this. I know you didn't. That's my fault, too. I felt tears starting in my own eyes, but blinked them back. I needed to be clear, needed to say things I'd never said before. I taught you not to see me. I made myself so small, so uncomplicated, so relentlessly fine that you believed it. You believed I didn't need anything because I never asked for anything. You believed I didn't hurt because I never showed you the hurt. Why? His voice was anguished. Why would you do that? Because that's what mothers do. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Or what I thought mothers were supposed to do. We sacrifice. We absorb. We make it easy. We love our children more than we love ourselves. And somewhere in that math, we disappear. I don't want you to disappear. But I did, Marcus. I have been disappearing for years. And you didn't notice because I'd gotten so good at it. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. That joke you made at your party, about people passing their expiration date, it wasn't new. It was just the first time you said it out loud. You've been treating me like I'm expired for a long time. Like I'm this embarrassing relic from your past that you have to manage, have to keep at arm's length so your real life, your important life, can continue uninterrupted. That's not... But he stopped, because we both knew it was true. When's the last time you asked about my work? I asked gently. About my life. About anything that didn't directly relate to you. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't answer because he couldn't remember. I'm a nurse, Marcus. I've been a nurse for 17 years. I work in the cardiac unit at Providence. I save lives. Real lives. People who would die without me. And you've never once asked what that's like. Never asked about my patients, my colleagues, whether I'm fulfilled by my work or exhausted by it. You know what you know about my job? That I work nights sometimes. That's it. His face was devastated. I'm a terrible son. No, I said it firmly. You're a son who was raised by a mother who taught you terrible lessons. You're a son who learned that my needs don't matter because I never presented them as mattering. You're a son who became exactly what I trained you to be. Then let me learn different, he pleaded. Let me be better. Come back to Portland. We'll start over. No. The word hung between us, sharp and final. I'm not coming back to Portland, Marcus. Not right now. Maybe not ever. Mom, please, listen to me. I leaned forward, needing him to understand. I left because I had to. Because staying meant continuing to disappear. And I don't have enough of myself left to keep giving away. I left because, for the first time in 30 years, I chose myself over you. And that's not something I'm ready to undo just because you're sorry. So what, I just... leave? I drove all this way and you won't even... I didn't say leave. I took a breath, steadying myself. I said I'm not coming back. There's a difference. Marcus looked confused, hopeful, terrified all at once. You hurt me, I continued. Deeply. Not just with that joke, but with years of thoughtlessness, of taking me for granted, of treating me like I exist solely to support your life. And I forgive you for it. I do. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. Doesn't mean going back to how things were. Then what does it mean? It means we start from here. From this moment. From this place where I'm not just your mother, but Diana. Where I have a life that doesn't revolve around you. Where I matter independently of my usefulness to you. He nodded slowly, taking it in. Okay. How do we do that? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I think it starts with you going back to Portland. What? He looked stricken. You have a life there. A job. A girlfriend. A whole existence that doesn't include me. And that's okay. That's how it should be. You're 30 years old. You should have your own life. I paused. But I should have mine too. Here, in Asheville. Maybe. I haven't decided yet. The truth was I had decided. But I wasn't ready to tell him that. Wasn't ready to explain that being here, in my grandmother's house, in a town where no one knew me as Marcus's mother, felt like breathing for the first time in decades. I need time, Marcus. Time to figure out who I am when I'm not taking care of you. Time to be alone without feeling guilty about it. How much time? I don't know. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, I could hear the wind moving through the dogwoods, the distant sound of traffic on Merriman Avenue. Normal sounds. Life continuing. Can I stay tonight? Marcus asked quietly. I'm exhausted. I can't drive back yet. I wanted to say no. Wanted to protect my space, my solitude. But I looked at him. This man I'd made. This person I loved despite everything. And I couldn't turn him away. There's a guest room upstairs. Second door on the left. Thank you. He stood, started toward the stairs, then stopped. Mom, the letter. You said you forgive me. Did you mean it? I thought about that. About what forgiveness actually meant, what it cost, what it required. Yes, I said finally. I forgive you, but Marcus, forgiveness isn't the same as trust. You broke something between us, and fixing it, if it can be fixed, is going to take more than apologies and cross-country drives. It's going to take you actually seeing me, actually asking about my life and meaning it, actually treating me like a person, not a service. I can do that, he said desperately. I will do that. Maybe. I met his eyes. But you're going to have to prove it, and I'm going to have to believe it. And neither of those things is going to happen overnight. He nodded, understanding settling over his face like a weight he'd have to learn to carry. Marcus stayed 2 days, not in the way he might have stayed before, expecting me to cook for him, to entertain him, to organize my life around his presence. Instead, he stayed quietly. He slept late that first morning, wrecked from the drive. When he came downstairs, I was already gone, out for a walk through the neighborhood, then to the farmer's market downtown, living my life. I came back to find him in the kitchen looking lost. He'd made coffee, badly, using the wrong ratio of grounds to water, and was sitting at my grandmother's table with his laptop open. Working? I asked. Trying to. I called in sick, but there's stuff I need to handle. He looked up at me, and I saw him actually look. Not glance, not skim. Actually see me standing there with my canvas grocery bag full of vegetables and bread from the local bakery. You look different. Different how? Lighter, maybe? I don't know. Less. He searched for the word. Less tired. I set the groceries on the counter. I am less tired. I've been sleeping past 5 a.m. for the first time in 8 years. You always wake up at 5:30. Because you used to wake up at 5:30 when you were little, and I never broke the habit. I started unpacking vegetables, tomatoes, squash, fresh basil. Bodies remember what minds try to forget. He watched me move around the kitchen, and I felt his attention like something tangible, like he was studying me, trying to understand who I was beyond the role he'd assigned me. What are you making? He asked. Ratatouille. For myself. For dinner tonight. Can I help? The question surprised me. Marcus had never offered to help me cook. Had barely been in a kitchen since he moved out except to open takeout containers. Do you know how to use a knife? I can learn. So I taught him. How to dice an onion without crying. How to slice zucchini into even rounds. How to mince garlic. We worked side by side in my grandmother's small kitchen, and for the first time in years, we existed together without me performing service. We were just 2 people making food. Simone and I broke up, he said after a while, his hands busy with a yellow squash. When? Last night, after I got here. I called her and told her I needed time to figure things out. He paused. She said I was being dramatic, that you'd get over it, and I was making a big deal out of nothing. And what did you say? I said she was wrong, that this wasn't nothing, that I'd hurt you in ways that couldn't be undone with a phone call and some flowers, that I needed to figure out how to be better. He looked at me. She said I was choosing you over her. Were you? I was choosing to deal with something I should have dealt with years ago. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I hadn't liked Simone, but I hadn't disliked her either. She was just young, unformed, someone who'd never had to sacrifice anything, and couldn't understand why anyone would. I'm sorry, Marcus continued, about bringing her to that dinner, about all the times I brought her around and she was condescending. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. She called your pot roast cute, I said quietly. I remember. He set down the knife. It wasn't cute. It was perfect. It tasted exactly like I remember from when I was a kid. And I didn't say that. I let her make you feel small. You didn't let her do anything, Marcus. She made her own choices. You made yours. But yes, you didn't defend me. You didn't even seem to notice. I notice now. Now that I've left. Yes, he didn't try to deny it. Now that you've left. We finished cooking in silence. The ratatouille simmered on the stove, filling the kitchen with the smell of tomatoes and herbs and olive oil. Grandmother Rose's smell. Home. We ate at the small table. Just the two of us. The house quiet around us. Marcus asked questions. Real questions. About the recipe. About my grandmother. About this town I'd fled to. About what my days looked like here. And I answered. Carefully at first, testing whether he was really listening or just performing interest. But gradually I realized he meant it. He wanted to know, wanted to understand the life I might build here, away from him. That hurt him. I could see it in his face, in the way he tried not to react when I talked about maybe staying in Asheville permanently, about maybe getting a nursing job at Mission Hospital, about maybe finally having a life that was mine. But he didn't ask me not to, didn't try to talk me out of it, just listened and nodded and carried his own pain quietly. Maybe he was learning after all. On the second evening, we walked downtown together. Marcus had never really seen Asheville, had come only once for the funeral, and hadn't paid attention to anything beyond his own discomfort. Now he looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. "It's nice," he said. "Smaller than Portland, but nice. It feels like a place where I could start over." "Is that what you want? To start over?" I thought about that. Not start over exactly. Just start. For myself. For the first time. We walked past cafes and galleries and bookstores. Past street musicians and tourists and locals walking their dogs. The basilica rose ahead of us. Its dome lit up against the darkening sky. "Want to go in?" I asked. Marcus looked surprised. "To the church?" "I've been going sometimes. Not to Mass. I haven't gone that far. But just to sit. To think. I didn't know you were religious. I'm not. But Grandmother Rose was. And being here. In her house. In her town. I don't know. It feels like I'm supposed to figure something out about faith. About forgiveness. About grace." We climbed the steps and entered the basilica. It was evening, the church mostly empty. Candles flickering near the altar. Marcus had been raised Catholic too, but even less seriously than I had. Robert had insisted on baptism and First Communion because that's what you do. But he'd never believed any of it. And I'd been too tired to fight him, too tired to insist on anything. Now Marcus and I sat in a pew near the back, the silence enormous around us. "I don't know how to pray," he whispered. "Neither do I. Not really. But you come here anyway?" "I come here because it's quiet, because it's beautiful, because sitting in this space makes me feel like maybe there's something larger than my own pain." I looked at the crucifix above the altar, at Christ's suffering, made permanent in bronze. Grandmother Rose used to say that suffering wasn't meaningless if you offered it up. That pain could be transformed into something holy if you let it. Do you believe that? I don't know, but I'm trying to. I turned to him. I spent 30 years suffering for you, Marcus. Making myself small, going without, absorbing your pain so you wouldn't have to feel it. And I thought that was holy. Thought that was what love looked like. Mom. But it wasn't. It wasn't holy. It was just Irasha. And I'm trying to figure out what the difference is between sacrifice and self-destruction, between loving someone and losing yourself. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't want you to suffer for me anymore. Good, because I'm not going to. So what do you want? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. What did I want? I'd spent so long wanting things for Marcus that I'd forgotten how to want things for myself. I want to wake up without dread, I said finally. I want to have conversations where I'm not performing. I want to work because I want to, not because I'm terrified of what happens if I stop. I want to be alone without feeling guilty. I want to be seen without having to fight for it. Do you want me in your life? The question hung between us, enormous and terrifying. Yes, I said quietly, but differently. Not as the center of my universe, not as the person I organized my entire existence around. As my son, someone I love but who doesn't consume me. I can be that, Marcus said, and I heard the desperation in his voice. I can be better. Maybe, but it's going to take time and distance, and both of us learning how to be different with each other. How much distance? I don't know yet. Months, probably. Maybe longer. I looked at him. I'm not punishing you, Marcus. I'm protecting myself. I'm choosing myself for the first time in 30 years, and I need you to let me do that. Even if it means losing you. You're not losing me. You're losing the version of me that existed only for you. But that person, she was disappearing anyway. She was dying. This, I gestured around us at the church, at Asheville, at the life I was beginning. This is me trying to live. Marcus left the next morning. We said goodbye on my grandmother's porch, the October air cold and bright. He looked better than when he'd arrived, showered, rested, less desperate. But there was a sadness in him now, a weight he hadn't carried before. I'll call, he said, if that's okay. It's okay. But Marcus, if I don't answer, don't panic. Don't call 20 times. Don't assume I'm punishing you. Sometimes I just need silence. He nodded. Can I come visit? Eventually. Yes, when I'm ready. How will I know when you're ready? I'll tell you. He hugged me then. Really hugged me. Not the quick, obligatory embraces we'd exchanged for years. He held on like he was afraid to let go. And I let him hold me, let myself be held, without feeling the need to comfort him or make it easier. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I love you, Mom. I know. Do you love me? Yes. I said it simply, without qualification. I love you. I always will. But Marcus, love isn't enough anymore. It never was. He got in his car, and I watched him drive away. Watched until his taillights disappeared around the corner, until the street was empty again, and I was alone. And I felt okay. Not happy, not resolved, but okay. The weeks after Marcus left were strange and quiet. I established routines in my grandmother's house. I woke naturally, without an alarm. I made coffee slowly, using the French press properly now, learning to enjoy the ritual. I walked downtown most mornings, exploring this town that was slowly becoming mine. I applied for a nursing position at Mission Hospital and got it. Part-time, 3 12-hour shifts a week in the cardiac unit. The work was familiar but different. New colleagues, new patients, no one who knew me as anyone's mother. I was just Diana, just me. I attended Mass occasionally, not every Sunday, but often enough that Father Michael started nodding at me in recognition. I still didn't take communion, still couldn't quite get there. But I lit candles sometimes, left prayers I didn't quite believe in but needed to speak anyway. Marcus called once a week on Sundays. Brief calls at first, awkward and careful. Both of us learning how to talk to each other differently. He asked about my work, my house, my life. Asked without expecting anything in return. And I answered honestly, without performing, without making it easy. It was uncomfortable, but it was real. 6 weeks after I'd left Portland, a package arrived. Inside was a check, large enough to make me gasp, and a note in Marcus's handwriting. Mom, this is for the college loans. I know I can't pay back everything you spent on me, but this is a start. I've been looking at my finances, really looking, and I had no idea how much money I was wasting on things that don't matter. Expensive dinners, trips, tech I didn't need. I'm learning to live differently. I'm also in therapy, twice a week, talking about you, about Dad, about the ways I learned to not see people. My therapist says I have an empathy deficit, which is a fancy way of saying I'm selfish, but I'm working on it. I don't expect this to fix anything. I know money doesn't erase what I did, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. I'm trying to see the cost of things, the real cost. I love you, Marcus. I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table with that check in my hands and cried. Not because of the money, though. God knows I could use it. But because he'd seen it. He'd finally seen what I'd given up, what I'd sacrificed, what it had cost me. He'd finally seen me. I deposited the check the next day and used part of it to fix the roof on my grandmother's house. The rest I put in savings. Real savings. Not the account I constantly depleted for Marcus's needs. Money that was mine. Money I might spend on something frivolous. Or not spend at all. Just money that existed as proof I had value, beyond what I could give away. Winter came to Asheville. The dogwoods lost their leaves. The mountains turned gray and stark. I worked my shifts at the hospital, came home to a quiet house, learned to enjoy my own company. Linda called from Portland sometimes. She'd gone by my house. Marcus had hired someone to clean and maintain it. He asked if I wanted him to sell it, and I said not yet. I wasn't ready to burn that bridge completely. Wasn't ready to say never. Christmas approached, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't know how I'd spend it. Marcus asked if he could come to Asheville, and I said not yet. The wound was still too fresh. The healing still too fragile. Instead, I spent Christmas Eve at the Basilica, attending midnight mass for the first time since I was a teenager. The church was packed, families and tourists and people like me, looking for something they couldn't name. The choir sang Silent Night in 4-part harmony, and I wept through the entire song. Not from sadness exactly, but from release, from letting go of the woman I'd been, from beginning to accept the woman I was becoming. On Christmas Day, I volunteered at the community kitchen downtown, serving meals to people who had nowhere else to go. It felt right, this service, not because anyone needed me to perform it, not because I was proving my worth, but because it was something I chose, something I gave freely, without resentment, without depletion. Marcus called that evening. We talked for an hour. The longest conversation we'd had since I left. He told me about therapy, about the things he was learning about himself, about the ways he was trying to change. He didn't ask when he could visit, didn't pressure me to come back, just talked to me like I was a person he wanted to know. "Are you happy?" he asked at the end. I thought about that. Happy felt like too big a word, but something was shifting inside me. Something was healing. "I'm becoming happy," I said. "I'm learning how." Spring came slowly to Asheville. The dogwoods bloomed again, white and pink against the brightening sky. My grandmother's hydrangeas pushed up new growth. The world renewed itself, indifferent to human pain, offering its beauty anyway. I'd been gone from Portland for 6 months when Marcus asked if he could visit. "Yes," I said. "You can come." He arrived on a Friday evening in April, driving that same long drive, but this time with permission. I met him on the porch and we hugged, carefully, both of us aware of how fragile this reconciliation still was. "The house looks good," he said, looking around. "I'd painted the shutters, planted new flowers, made this space mine. Thank you." We had dinner at a restaurant downtown. My suggestion, neutral territory. Over pasta and wine, we talked. Really talked. Marcus told me about his job. Not just the highlights, but the frustrations and fears. He told me he'd left the startup, taken a position with better hours and less pressure. He told me he was dating someone new, carefully, slowly, someone his own age who challenged him. And I told him about my life, about my patience at mission, about the book club I'd joined at the library, about Father Michael and the slow journey back towards something like faith, about being 54 years old and finally learning who I was. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said quietly. For what? For leaving. For choosing yourself. For teaching me that love isn't supposed to erase people. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm proud of you two. For doing the work. For trying to change. Are we okay? He asked. Really okay. We're becoming okay, I said. It's a process. He stayed the weekend. We walked through the mountains, drove out to the Biltmore estate, sat on my grandmother's porch drinking coffee, and reading in comfortable silence. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, of old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But we caught them now, named them, chose differently. Sunday morning, Marcus came to Mass with me, sat beside me in the pew, not praying exactly, but present. When it came time for communion, I stood, surprising myself, and walked forward. Received the host for the first time in decades. Felt it dissolve on my tongue, like a promise. Not redemption, not forgiveness, complete, but grace. Small grace, the kind that accumulates quietly, until one day you realize you've been healed without noticing. Marcus left Sunday afternoon. We said goodbye on the porch again, but this time it felt different, less desperate, more hopeful. Can I come back? He asked. Yes, you can come back. When? Whenever you want. Just call first. He smiled. A real smile, warm and unguarded. I will. I watched him drive away, and this time, I didn't feel abandoned, didn't feel erased, just felt peaceful. This was what healing looked like, not a dramatic transformation, not a single moment of reconciliation, but the slow accumulation of better choices, the gradual rebuilding of something that had been broken. I went inside and stood in my living room, my grandmother's living room, my living room, and looked at the crucifix on the mantel, that simple wooden cross, worn smooth by decades of her devotion. I understood now what she'd been praying for all those years, not for her suffering to end, not for easy answers or simple solutions, but for the strength to carry what needed carrying, for the grace to forgive what needed forgiving, for the courage to choose life even when life was hard. I knelt, awkwardly, my knees creaking, and I prayed. Not the memorized prayers of my childhood, just words from my own heart, rough and honest and true. Thank you for giving me the courage to leave. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't mean disappearing. Thank you for this house, this town, this life I'm building. Thank you for Marcus, for who he was, who he is, who he might become. Thank you for second chances. Thank you for survival. Thank you for today. I stayed there until my knees went numb, until the light through the windows shifted and changed, until I felt held by something larger than my own small story. Then I stood, brushed off my pants, and went to make dinner. Just for myself, just for the joy of it. Epilogue. 2 years later, I still live in Asheville. I bought my grandmother's house from the estate, made it legally mine. I work full-time at Mission now, in the cardiac unit, training new nurses and saving lives and being good at something that has nothing to do with motherhood. Marcus visits 3 or 4 times a year. Sometimes he brings his girlfriend, Emma, a labor lawyer who's kind and funny, and doesn't need to diminish me to feel secure. They're talking about getting married. He asked if I'd help plan the wedding, and I said yes, carefully, with boundaries. We talk more now. Real conversations where both of us show up fully. He knows about my life, knows about my colleagues, my book club, my slowly rebuilding faith. I know about his. Knows about his therapy, his work, his fears and hopes, and the ways he's trying to be better. It's not perfect. There are still moments where old patterns resurface, where he assumes too much, or I give too much, or we both fall into the familiar dance of mother and son as we learned it 30 years ago. But we catch it now. We name it. We choose differently. Last month, Marcus sent me a letter. An actual letter, handwritten, 3 pages long. In it, he thanked me for leaving. Thanked me for loving him enough to refuse to keep disappearing. Thanked me for teaching him that real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters, requires both people to exist fully. He ended the letter with a line that made me cry. "You're not invisible anymore, Mom. I see you, finally. I see you." I framed that letter, hung it on the wall in my bedroom, where I can see it every morning when I wake up. Not as proof that I did the right thing. I don't need proof anymore. But as a reminder that some wounds, when tended carefully, can heal into something stronger than they were before. I'm 56 now. I have gray hair I don't apologize for. I have a life that belongs to me. I have a son I love who is learning, slowly, to love me back in a way that doesn't require my erasure. I have a small house in a small town, a job I'm good at, a faith I'm rebuilding brick by brick. I have myself, and after 30 years of giving that away, of watching it disappear piece by piece, that feels like enough. More than enough. It feels like grace. The end my son toasted at his birthday party and said, "Some people are way past their time, right, Mom?" Making everyone burst into laughter. I left in tears. The next day, I moved to my house in another state and left him only a letter. When he read it, he fell to his knees.